The crowd was buzzing, cheering as the announcer motioned for everyone to count down the last 5 seconds together. Rin Troy stood among the people, shrouded in mystical light, realizing that something had gone wrong. The thought struck him like lightning, damn, he's here again, it's all happening again. Rin raised his hands, looking at them anxiously, not believing this was reality. He was back at the very moment he hadn't yet been dragged into this damned nightmare. Rin Troy clenched his fist, remembering that he was already on the 20th cycle of this madness. He figured if he could, he'd just stop time right now. A message flashed before his eyes, Rune of Regression, all 100 uses exhausted. Rin raised his head, realizing that this was his last chance, and he couldn't let it go. He took a deep breath and covered his face with his hand, determined to finally end this game. Rin Troy adjusted his clothes, pondering who he should take with him for the last round. Standing a little farther away was a guy with a serious expression on his face as the cheering crowd buzzed around him. Next to him, 2 friends were having a lively discussion about no longer needing fake IDs. One of them wondered aloud what he would be after graduation and was seriously considering a job as a delivery boy. Another guy turned to him and asked what his future plans were. Yunming grinned and calmly stated that he was going to become a gangster after graduation. The friend incredulously asked again, but Yunming only shrugged his shoulders, saying that you only live once. The company laughed, thinking he was crazy, and someone even thought it was time to call it quits. One of the guys suddenly asked what would happen to their shuttle when Yunming graduated. Yunming smirked and said that he wouldn't let that guy go even after graduation. Yunming grinned, deciding that he wouldn't let go of his victim and would continue to bully him. The friend suddenly pointed towards the crowd, asking if that was where his shuttle was standing. The announcer's voice rang out, urging everyone to start the countdown to the start of the event. Yunming smiled widely, agreeing that this moment was indeed important. Meanwhile, Ren Troy stood in the crowd, shrouded in a strange glow as the numbers dwindled. Yunming looked forward in surprise, noticing a familiar figure among the crowd. Ren Troy stood nearby, silently watching him with an impenetrable expression. Yunming frowned, sensing that something was wrong. He usually behaved differently. His friends tried to lighten the mood by reminding him that today was the first day of the new year. Yunming grimaced, but reluctantly dropped that he would just let it go this time. Yunming and his friends happily discussed that they had finally become adults, celebrating the new year. An unseen observer mockingly noted how funny it was to watch people rejoice without knowing the truth. Yunming turned around sharply upon hearing the strange words, but his friend confusedly replied that he hadn't said anything. A bright light illuminated the space, and a voice said disdainfully that people looked like caged monkeys. A creature with wings and closed eyes appeared before them, watching them with a predatory grin. The crowd looked up, amazed by the glowing creature, debating whether it was an angel or part of the show. Rin Troy raised his head, looking at the familiar figure, feeling the hatred, even after 99 repetitions. The creature grinned, as if mocking their ignorance, enjoying their confusion. It noted with disdain how stupid the humans looked, stunned by its appearance. With a slight smile, it confirmed that they could hear his voice perfectly well, and that was just the beginning. One of the men irritably pointed at the creature, loudly demanding an explanation of who it was. Rin Troy only sighed heavily, thinking how pathetic it was that the men still didn't understand anything. The creature mockingly covered its mouth with its hand, as if amused by what was happening. The eyes under its veil glowed scarlet, expressing obvious annoyance. In the next second, the man's scream was cut short as his head exploded in a bloody splatter. A young man in the crowd shuddered, staring in horror at his blood-stained hand. Screams of horror swept across the square as people scattered in panic. Yunming froze, swallowing convulsively as he tried to realize what they had just encountered. The creature had mockingly declared that humans had no right to even speak disrespectfully to it. It warned the crowd that anyone who showed insolence would share the same terrible fate. The creature hovered over the city, asking disdainfully if the people realized what was happening to them. Ren Troy sighed heavily, annoyed that he would have to listen to the same thing again. With a smile, the creature announced that they would all now be participants in a new game. It explained that every month their souls would be transported to another world for testing. People need to complete tasks to earn rewards and return back to their reality. Yunming frowned, trying to figure out if they would really be able to escape by completing the task. The creature only grinned, saying that even that didn't guarantee survival for everyone. Ren Troy listened intently, realizing that half the people would still be destroyed. The crowd gasped in panic, and some shouted in despair that it couldn't be. The creature laughed ominously, assuring them that they shouldn't worry too much about it. Ren Troy listened tensely as the creature announced exactly who would be a participant in the game. He exhaled tiredly, remembering how just after his 20th birthday he had found himself in this endless cycle. Nearby, a man was screaming hysterically, happily assuring everyone that he had managed to escape. The others looked at him with disdain, accusing him of only escalating the situation. Yunming grabbed his clothes, furiously recalling how the man's head exploded in front of their eyes. The creature looked down thoughtfully, announcing the sheer number of participants in the game. It smiled widely, offering to finally begin since the explanation had already been completed. Rin Troy suddenly found himself in an empty space, isolated from everyone else. A voice informed him that his body had to undergo an adjustment process before he could be transferred. His own figure was reflected in front of him, giving him a single choice to make. Rin Troy calmly decided that he would make the same choice again this time. He stepped forward, calling his game name, Black Scythe. His body began to dissolve, moving into a new world filled with vibrant colors. A vast landscape opened before his eyes, full of greenery and wind calling to the unknown. Golden symbols flashed around him, completing the process of being transported into the game. Rin Troy opened his eyes and examined himself, noting that this was his 100th entry into the game. His body felt familiar after all, he had been using this appearance since the 12th time. Around him, people were discussing their new appearances with admiration, checking out the changes. Rin only grinned, realizing that smart players wouldn't stand out like that. Only the strong survive in this world, for death here meant the end in reality. Ren Troy hummed, realizing that this person had to appear here as well. Yunming Huang stepped forward, choosing an imposing, muscular appearance. Ren grinned, expecting this, as the man had always wanted to look stronger than he was. The creature with wings rather remarked on how wonderful their frightened faces looked. Someone in the crowd remarked anxiously that there were far fewer people here than promised. The creature mockingly called the humans inferior creatures, preparing to continue the explanation. It reminded irritably that there were many such spaces, and each one had its own game going on. The voice announced that participants would be given a simple guide before the official start. The first step was to mentally say status window to see their characteristics. Rin Troy looked at the pop-up menu without emotion, sighing heavily at the familiar sight. The creature looked at the gathered crowd and asked if everyone had already examined their status windows. It grinned, stating that if the players wanted to survive, they needed to get stronger. Only those who made it through all 20 rounds would be able to free themselves from this deadly game. In addition, the winner would be granted any wish, which caused a gasp of surprise in the crowd. With a sly smile, the creature added that it had a special gift in store for the first place. Yunming Huang opened the inventory, scrutinizing the menu that appeared in front of him. He surprisingly pulled out an item, a mysterious rune obtained randomly. The voice explained that this rune was disposable and could only be used once. It could only be activated at the first level, and it was the only starting item. Yunming squeezed the rune in his hand, mentally saying use while watching its reaction. Rin froze, his eyes widening and a drop of sweat rolling down his cheek. A realization came over him. The angel-like judge hovering before him smirked, noting Ren's frustration and reminding him of the inevitability of fate. With a slight sneer, he offered to finish with the runes and get on with the real test. His graceful fingers snapped, releasing a stream of golden light that foreshadowed the events to come. The crowd of people froze in front of the system window. Everyone had to kill 100 goblins. There was no turning back. A goblin appeared out of thin air, sparkling with golden runes, and immediately rushed to attack. One of the participants froze, stunned, asking if it was really a goblin, because everything felt like a game. The angel-like judge floated in the air, coldly reminding them that it was too early to rejoice. Hundreds of golden flashes tore through space. The goblin summoning was just beginning. The humans backed away in panic, realizing the magnitude of it. The number of summoned creatures was frighteningly huge. The angel-like judge with a grim smile announced the harsh conditions: 10,000 humans against 50,000 goblins. One of the monsters rushed forward with a piercing shriek, causing the crowd to scream and scramble back in panic. The people froze, watching as the stranger moved calmly through the crowd, showing no fear. Someone was stunned to notice that he was heading straight for the monster, as if unaware of the danger. There were startled cries, people around him trying to warn him, but he didn't stop. Ren's eyes flashed, and he turned his head, focusing on the attacking goblin. His body rushed forward with lightning speed, and he delivered a powerful blow, sealing the enemy into the ground. The surrounding observers froze, realizing that this was the first time they had seen something like this. Rin realized, first impressions in a group were incredibly important and could determine everything. He needed to leave a vivid image of his power in their minds, and he did so. The goblin's body crashed to the ground with a thud, and a discarded dagger fell nearby. Ren leaned down calmly, his fingers steady on the hilt of the weapon. He knew that the most important thing now was to demonstrate his strength in front of everyone. The angel-like judge watched him with a slight smile, clearly intrigued. Rin swung his dagger, fending off the approaching goblins, their shrill screams cutting through the air. Ren moved swiftly, slashing the goblins with precise, flawless strikes, leaving only fallen foes behind him. The crowd watched him in amazement, chattering. Who was he, anyway? More goblins gathered in front of him, but he remained motionless, as if unaware of the threat. Some of the participants gained confidence, deciding that they too could handle it, though not as well as Black Scythe. But as soon as one of them took a step forward, the goblin instantly attacked, causing him to turn pale with terror. The goblin lashed out with fury at one of the participants, knocking him to the ground to the startled screams of those around him. The boy shrank back, his face contorted with fear and despair as he realized what a nightmare he had fallen into. People rushed to flee in panic, their cries for help echoing across the field, but no one stopped. Ren looked back. The goblins were advancing again, filling the space, giving no respite to anyone. In the midst of the chaos, dark magic flared up, encompassing the fighters, and a voice shouted desperately, "Inferno!" Carnage was unfolding all around, and now no one could take it for a game anymore. There was only one thought in people's heads: drowning out everything else, survive. They ran in panic, obeying instinct, not thinking about direction or consequences. Rin watched with cold determination, remembering how he himself had made the same mistake. Only after dying twice did he realize the terrible truth: there was no way out of this dimension. Rin could barely stay on his feet as dazzling golden energy erupted around him. One of the participants in the distance exclaimed in horror, not realizing what was happening. The guy with the knife gritted his teeth, realizing that ordinary people were unlikely to be able to kill even a goblin. He stabbed the enemy with difficulty, but his movements were uncertain, fear still restraining him. However, before he could recover, the new goblin swung its claws, releasing a bright blue strike. Screams of despair echoed across the field, people falling under the onslaught of goblins, begging for help. The angel-like judge noted with a slight chuckle that even small enemies were deadly in a crowd. He adjusted his hood and watched with interest as one man stood out amongst the chaos. Rin stood amongst the defeated enemies, his blade flickering and his magical energy wavering in the air. A pop-up window showed his progress: Black Scythe, 70 out of 100 goblins killed. The angelic-looking judge clicked his tongue irritably, glancing unhappily at the system's limited interface. He sighed, recognizing that helping mortals hurt his pride, but it was entertaining to watch them. Ren swung his blade, cleaving the goblin in two, blue energy surging through the air. A system notification confirmed the kill experience and 10 gold had been gained. Progress had reached 75 out of 100. He raised his head, his gaze remained cold, but there was already a hint of victory in the air. The goblins rushed at Ren with a squeal, their greedy gazes glittering in anticipation. He swung his blade without hesitation, releasing a powerful stream of blue energy, tearing apart his enemies. With a bloody face and burning eyes, he grinned, noticing how the enemies began to waver. Ren slowly clenched the bloody dagger in his hand, his confidence unwavering. The goblins backed away in fear, making anxious noises as they realized who they were facing. Rin exhaled, briefly running his hand over his face, finally allowing himself a respite. A status window popped up in front of him, confirming that he had reached level 4. He immediately put all the points he had gained into agility, realizing its key importance. This parameter increased the speed of attacks, movement, and allowed for better dodging. Rin glanced at the blade, pondering if he was strong enough to finish the fight. The goblins roared as blue magical energy surged around Rin, rising in spirals. He looked at his foes with a challenge, his voice sounded calm, but he read the threat in it. The monsters froze for a moment, hesitating, but soon raised their weapons again and screamed. Rin exhaled quietly as he looked forward, then took the first step with cold determination. The smudged shadows of his movement swept across the field, and the battle began with renewed vigor. Rin slashed at the goblin with a final swing of his blade, enveloped in flashes of blue energy. A system message popped up in front of him: mission completed, level up. 100 goblins killed and the first stage was complete. He had passed it without a single mistake. A golden light surrounded him, marking the end of the challenge and the transition to the next stage. He realized that he was chopping enemies non-stop, hoping to attract the judge's attention, but a system notification flashed in front of Rin, confirming his achievement of the first rank in the zone. He glanced at the screen, where his name Black Scythe stood at the top of the rankings with a record time. Rin grinned. He had aimed for this. He knew that passing speed was important. For first place, he had received a coupon for his choice of weapons, as well as a special reward box. Now he could get more valuable prizes than the others, and that was worth taking advantage of. Rin opened the reward selection menu, his finger hovering over the rare weapon coupon. 3 options appeared before him: a long sword, a stiletto, and a throwing spear. He hesitated, realizing that even such a reward at the beginning of his journey would give him a great advantage. Without hesitation, he chose the stiletto, his hand confidently reaching for the flashed screen. The weapon appeared before him, its characteristics confirmed. It was the best dagger for beginners. Rin discarded the old dagger without regret, deciding he no longer needed it. He closed the menu, saving the special reward box for later, when it would come in handy. Looking around, he noticed the other contestants happily inspecting their awards. Suddenly he remembered the strange title he had received earlier and called up the status box. It listed hidden title, Last Regressor, something that hadn't happened in 99 attempts. Rin clutched the scarlet shard in his hand, uttering a single word: use. The system alerted him to the receipt of the rune of regression, which was to be imprinted on his body. He felt a strange tension, but a moment later the message confirmed: the imprinting had failed. The system revealed remnants of the same rune in his soul, proving that this was already the 100th regression. Ren froze, pondering what he had heard, for a new rune would mean endless regressions. Rin stared dazedly at the notification. He had received the title, The Last Regressor. The system explained that titles surpassed even runes in importance, having unique effects. The only known resurrection ability belonged to priests, but his title was completely different. This effect restored all health, allowing him to choose a point of return before dying. Ren smirked and hid the title in the settings without a second thought, realizing that such a power should not be revealed. Rin breathes heavily, feeling tired, and thinks that those who have passed the task should show up now. Exhausted men with crazed eyes emerge from the portal, their bloody hands clutching weapons. They have found the target. Rin smirks, his gaze full of determination. This time he will definitely survive, no matter what. Dazzling pillars of light erupt in the sky, their radiance piercing the air, causing everyone to instinctively freeze. The figure watches with a mysterious smile, wondering with lazy interest why things have gotten so boring. The battlefield is strewn with bodies, among which the fighting men are trying to help the wounded, while someone's voice calmly notes that their numbers are dwindling. A figure with wings tilts his head slightly, saying thoughtfully that perhaps he should make what is happening more interesting. The man's gaze clouds over, lips quivering, and the words "more fun" come off them as if in doubt. A scarred man lies on the ground, his eyes struggling to open but immediately engulfed in fear as his body begins to disappear. The people around them watch in horror as the corpse vaporizes in golden sparks and panic, asking what is even happening. Mysterious symbols flicker in the air, and the people clutching their weapons look warily at the winged figure in the distance. Suddenly, hordes of monsters roar down from somewhere above, their fierce screams cutting through the air. Realizing the imminent threat, one of the fighters breathes out a curse and his face contorts in fear. The mysterious man with a wide smile claims to have given everyone 50,000 new enemies. That's enough. There is a desperate cry. Someone in a panic orders them to be killed while the goblins rush to attack. The battle erupts with terrifying fury. The men fight back desperately, thrusting their weapons into the bodies of their attackers. One of the fighters, scratched and bloody, clutches a dagger and plunges it into a goblin with fury. Screams of pain merge into chaos and bloody spray flies everywhere as the number of survivors slowly grows. A man with a face contorted with anger clutches the goblin's head, his muscles tense with rage. Rin breathes heavily, recovering from the fight as a new survivor count pops up over the field. A bloody hand shakes in the air, fingers clenching convulsively as if trying to hold on for life. The goblin draws his dagger with a fierce growl, but there is a man standing in front of him, ready to strike back. The number of survivors continues to grow, and in the shadows someone is watching with an enigmatic smile. Rin stares forward, his gaze cold and determined, golden sparks flickering around him. The battlefield falls silent, light encompassing everything around them. The mission is complete, the survivors have finally been rescued. One of the survivors looks around in confusion, clutching his dagger as he realizes, the goblins are gone. A figure with wings announces that half of the contestants have passed the test, and the task is now complete. With cold detachment, the man adds that the rest, unfortunately, must die. These are the rules. Panic-stricken, one of the fighters desperately cries out that he only needs one kill to be saved. The woman watches in horror as the people around her begin to disappear in a golden light, unable to utter a word. The figure with wings mockingly asks why everyone's faces are like that. Aren't they glad to be alive? Then, with a slight chuckle, he announces that the first round is over and hopes that the second round will go better. The results appear on the screen. Black Scythe takes first place, and the winners receive their awards. The system confirms that the leader holds the first position, and the prizes include gold and rare weapons. Rin stares silently at the glowing text. He's been awarded 1,000 gold, but access to the store won't be available until later. Rin smirks, realizing that now everyone knows he's the first place winner. The figure with wings notes how impressive it is to be the leader in all areas of the challenge. With mild interest, the man asks him directly, confirming his name, and receives a quiet reply. Then, squinting thoughtfully, he continues the questioning, trying to figure out where he got his power from. But in the next second, the man's face darkens and a disturbing scolding flashes through his thoughts. Rin asks, with a slight chuckle, if the person he's talking to can't just watch his runes through the characterization window. The figure with wings slowly replies, claiming that as an angel he already knows everything, but that was just a test. Rin smirks even wider and dismisses that possibility with a scoff to himself, of course not. Then he quietly utters a single word, drawing the attention of his companion. The angel, tensing slightly, turns to him as he asks for one small favor. Rin repeats the question with a slight smile, as if knowing in advance that his words will elicit a reaction. He calmly raises his head to the figure with wings and notices that the first place awards are too modest. The people around him freeze, their faces contorted in surprise. No one expected anyone to dare say such a thing. The angel's eyes flash with a dangerous light, and his voice is filled with cold bewilderment. What did he just say? Ren, arms crossed, nonchalantly adds that he'd like a better reward without losing his composure. The angel's eyes flash and his voice rings with tension. What did he just say, human? Rin, without changing his facial expression, calmly states that he wants a better reward. This one doesn't suit him. The people around him hold their breath as they watch the figure with wings hover in the air, unmoving. The angel's lips stretch into a sinister grin, and his thoughts are full of irritated bewilderment. Is he seriously demanding something? The fingers of his hand shake with restrained rage as the promise to tear the defiant mortal apart flashes through his mind. Angel clenches his fists, inwardly cursing the situation. He's already used his power and he can't kill him. His eyes go wide in realization. Something is wrong here, this needs to be reconsidered. Then his lips slowly stretch into a smile, and a sly pleasure in his voice. He's had a great idea. He lowers his gaze to Ren and asks with feigned gentleness if he really wants a better reward. Usually such requests are rejected at once, but something tells him that this time it will be different. The angel offers to discuss everything in private, adding that the other people can wait for his return. Some are amazed that negotiations with an angel are even possible, and wonder if they should try it too. Others watch Ren with envy, wondering how valuable his new reward will be. Ren stares ahead in silence, his face impenetrable but his gaze even sharper. One of the fighters frowns as he looks up at him, and is perplexed and silent, not understanding what is going on here. Rin leaves the battlefield with a slight smirk, leaving behind those watching him. He walks leisurely down the forest path, keeping his distance from the figure with wings that follows. The angel notices this and asks irritably why he's staying so far away, demanding that he keep up. Irritation flickers through his thoughts. People are always so greedy and stupid, you have to tell them everything twice. He frowns, pondering how to change the reward when he didn't even choose it himself, but he wouldn't give a better one either. Angel smiles predatorily, thinking that Rin should have just been content with what he had. A decision is already ripening in his head. As soon as they get far enough away, he'll kill him. But then there's the thought that killing a player for personal reasons could be a serious problem. To avoid trouble, he must first make sure there are no witnesses left nearby. Lips stretch in a gloating smirk. That stupid man should have just kept quiet. Angel asks with a smile exactly what kind of reward Rin would like, bowing his head in a faintly polite manner. But before he can speak, his body jerks violently as Rin lands a swift, powerful blow to the face. A deafening sound echoes through the forest, and the angel jerks back, his eyes widening in surprise. With a furious burst of energy, he soars into the air, wings fluttering and expression contorted with shock. A clawed hand flinches, a single word flashes through his mind. What was that? Angel falls backwards, his face distorted in shock. He didn't even have time to react to the blow. Ren stands calmly in front of him, watching as he rises heavily from the ground, barely keeping his balance. Anger flashes in the angel's eyes, and a single thought flashes through his mind. Did this man really hit him? Fury flares up and he clenches his fists, and with curses he directs a stream of energy straight at his opponent. But suddenly, realizing something, the angel steps back, and his silhouette quickly disappears among the trees. The angel looks around in panic, realizing that Run has suddenly disappeared from his sight. But before he can do anything, someone's strong hand roughly grabs him by the wing. His eyes widen with fear as he frantically asks what the man is going to do. Run stares at him emotionlessly, his grip growing stronger, and the angel's scream pierces the air. With horror and pain, The angel squirms, but Ren remains cold-blooded as he continues to clutch the feather he ripped out. The angel's wings tear with a crack, golden feathers crumble to the ground, and pain twists his face. Ren looks down at him with indifference and tells him to stop whimpering, as if mocking him. Angel screams in pain, his body twitching, but Ren holds him down mercilessly, not letting him break free. With a cold smile, he declares that he can't escape now, his movements restrained. Angel, trembling, presses his wounded wing and through clenched teeth confirms that yes, it does hurt. Ren chuckles and remarks derisively that in 5 minutes the angel would have been asking stupid questions himself. The angel looks at him in confusion, angrily asking if he's lost his mind and what he's even talking about. But Ren remains unfazed, pointing to the dagger hidden in his wing and asking if he was going to kill him. Angel recoils, stammering, trying to deny it, but Ren only coldly says he's already figured it out. His gaze penetrates his opponent, and a predatory smile plays on his lips. He can see the lie right on his face. The creature in the luxurious robes froze, its lips quivering with horror. The man knew his name. It jerked its hand away sharply, its voice trembling with contempt, knowing that name was useless. Rin raised his weapon confidently, and the creature shrieked in panic, not realizing what was happening. Its face contorted with rage threatening, it declared that it could destroy Rin in an instant. But Rin only smirked, clutching his weapon. He calmly said that the creature was now incapable of killing. The creature's lips trembled and fear lingered in its eyes. It couldn't hide its desperation. It shrieked, trying to threaten Ren. His allies would definitely not be left behind. But Ren only grinned, dismissive that their kin didn't care about him. The creature cackled in panic, promising information, but Ren coldly replied that he didn't need it. He indifferently listed everything he already knew, and the creature froze, stunned, squeezing out, "What?" The creature cried out in despair, its body shuddering from the impact. It didn't have time to react. It screamed in pain as the fatal blow pierced it, tearing through tissue and flesh. Ren stood over it, watching as his opponent slowly lost strength, sinking to the ground. The system triumphantly announced the angel's first ever defeat and awarded him a new title. A scarlet trophy glowed in his hands, the angel's blood and the rune of carnage confirming his superiority. The rune flashed and was instantly imprinted on Ren's body, surrounding him with golden streams of energy. The system officially declared him the first angel slayer, bestowing the exclusive title and its benefits. He remembered the first time he learned the reward on his 13th attempt at revenge. It had been unattainable then. Rin smirked, pondering how shocked the angels would have been to learn that he already had the rune. His eyes flashed with a frightening light, and a single word resounded in his mind, and... Rin stared intently at the glowing vial, realizing that killing the angel had a special purpose for him. All players were given the ability to choose a class from level 10, but it required a special item. Usually such items could be obtained through hunting or fulfilling simple conditions, but there were exceptions. Unique classes were only given to one person and required special circumstances to obtain them. They were much stronger than normal ones, granting bonus characteristics, runes, and exceptional skills. Rin opened his inventory, reflecting on the fact that he had returned without even completing the first round. He decided to take advantage of the first place reward, knowing that it would give him an advantage. The main thing now was to reach level 10 as soon as possible and change classes. Without thinking, he chose the 3 times experience bonus, and the system immediately activated it. Clenching his fists, he firmly decided that he would be stronger this time, no matter what it took. The system announced the end of the first round, confirming the number of survivors and the upcoming soul transfer. The man collapsed to his knees in the pouring rain, his body shuddering in pain at his return. Looking around, he realized with shock that he was hearing the ringing of New Year's bells in a familiar world. Looking at the people around him, he tried to understand what had happened, questions swarming in his head. People around him were coming to their senses, wondering if it was all just a strange, frighteningly real dream. The man looked at his phone and froze. The time was the same as it had been in his dream. People around him groaned, holding their heads, their bodies whimpering in pain as if after a grueling battle. Someone anxiously asked if they had really all fainted at the same time, doubting the reality of what was happening. Conversations escalated. Everyone recalled the frighteningly realistic dream where they were fighting for survival. Some exclaimed joyfully that they were back, others doubted. After all, there was a goblin. The man exhaled stunned, realizing that it was all real. The goblins, the first round, the battle. He wondered if this meant they would be sent there again early next month. Suddenly, someone noticed that one of them still wasn't moving and called out to him worriedly. He ran closer and shook his friend by the shoulder, but he remained motionless, lying silently on the ground. His heart beat faster. With trembling hands he checked his pulse and whispered, "It can't be." The guy groped his friend's body in panic, His voice shaking, there was no breath, no pulse. Someone stunned whispered the dead man's name, not believing he was really dead. Another thought flashed through the mind. What if he died because he didn't survive the game? Everyone froze, realizing the terrible truth. Those who hadn't woken up weren't just unconscious. They stared in horror at the bodies around them, and one of them whispered, "Are they corpses?" The man realized in horror that half of the people hadn't survived, and the next round could be even worse. The other contestant was trembling, but his face contorted with a strange delight. Everyone was now equal before death. With a wild gleam in his eyes, he laughed, assuring that no one else could complain of injustice. Someone exploded with rage, shouting that it was truly unfair to die before one had had a chance to live. One of the survivors glared glumly at the laughing guy and muttered through his teeth, "Crazy bastard." The guy grinned, stating that he had always been just a common thug with nothing to lose. But his companion frowned, firmly replying that he still had plenty of goals in this life. He wondered lazily who he was so desperately looking for, if it was a servant. The image of the boy came to his mind, and he wondered if he'd been killed in the first round. Squinting doubtfully, he suddenly caught something in the corner of his ear and became alert. The boy turned his head sharply, his gaze locking onto the strange man in the crowd. He looked unusual, and someone nearby whispered in surprise, noting his strange clothing. The man swallowed, feeling a chill run down his spine. It couldn't be true. A light flashed before his eyes, his fingers trembling involuntarily at the unexpected sensation. His eyes widened, a status window opened right in front of him. The guy stared incredulously at the window that flashed before him, doubting that such a thing was possible in reality. But around him, other people began to call up their status windows as well, amazed to confirm that it worked. Someone asked the ultimate question: could they really use all their skills and items now? He clenched his fist, feeling the power from the game truly resonate in his body. Looking at his hands, he exhaled shocked. It's not gone. It's real. The guy smiled widely, feeling the excitement. This was all just awesome. The news was reporting shocking events. Thousands of people had passed out at the same time in the square. A mysterious woman dressed as an angel appeared in the sky, hovering slowly above the New Year's Eve bell. As soon as someone pointed at her, there was an explosion, and the person died instantly. She then spread her arms out, addressing the people below, her face shining with frightening confidence. Thousands of people suddenly collapsed unconscious, causing panic among eyewitnesses. Police said most of the victims were young people between the ages of 15 and 29. The news confirmed that similar events happened not only here but also around the world. On the internet, users discussed what happened, doubting the reality of what happened and calling it a fake. Rin looked at his phone screen and coldly thought, this is only the beginning. Rin calmly looked forward, realizing that the real problem lay much deeper. The news was calling the survivors players, but the true cause of what was happening remained undisclosed. The impact of these changes is not as noticeable now, but in time, the players will become entities beyond human. No weapon will be able to stop them, and there will be uncontrollable living weapons in the world. He stepped forward firmly, knowing that if left to its own devices, the world would collapse long before the 20th round. Rin knew there was only one solution, and he was ready to implement it. He had to subdue all the players using unstoppable force, or the world was doomed. But it was too early to act. He already had candidates to recruit. Calmly walking down the deserted street, he mentally calculated all possible steps. When he reached his hideout, he opened the door and stepped inside, preparing for the next step. Rin quietly opened the door, looking around carefully, checking to make sure everything was in order. There was an empty cup of ramen on the kitchen table. Once again, the lousy guy was eating the same thing. He opened the door to the room slightly and saw someone sleeping peacefully, unaware of anything. Even without his presence, this boy managed to fall asleep peacefully as if nothing had happened. Rin grinned as he looked at him and closed the door in silence, hiding his smile. Ryu-1 was sleeping peacefully, his breathing was even and his face looked serene. He was a younger brother who was about to enter his third year of middle school. After his parents had died in a car accident, their lives had changed in an instant. Ren had become his sole guardian, taking full responsibility for their family. Vaughn moved sleepily, opening his eyes and muttering through his slumber, Rin wakes Kale up, firmly telling him it's time to get up. Kale, still not fully awake, sleepily raises his head and asks what's going on. He rubs his eyes unhappily, noting that it's only 6 in the morning. Ren doesn't give him a chance to go back to sleep. She abruptly throws the blanket over him. Kale grumbles, asking where they're going, and adds that he'd better get some sleep. Kale looks at Ren carefully, his face tense and his voice sounding serious. Ren can see that Kale isn't joking, and freezes when he talks about the chaos in the world. He confusedly remembers that he was going to the New Year ceremony, and asks what happened. Kale doesn't answer directly, only offers to step outside, promising to explain everything on the way. Rin walks beside Kale down the dark street, his gaze is anxious and there is tension in the air. Rin looks at Kale and notices that his face is unusually serious, which is unsettling. Kale is surprised that Ren is completely unaware of what's going on and asks him directly about it. Rin becomes concerned, feeling a growing fear, and asks what happened while he was asleep. Kale tells him to check the latest news, and Rin quickly pulls out his phone, nervously staring at the screen. He is stunned by what he reads. A certain angel has been abducting people, taking their souls to another world. Rin is shocked to realize that Kale has been through this horror as well, but he calmly confirms it. He anxiously asks if it's true and if Kale was injured. Kale remains unfazed and asks not to worry about him, but Rin can't contain his emotions. Memories flash before his eyes and his gaze stops at the altar with pictures of the dead. A bitter thought echoes inside. Now he only has one person left, Kale. Rin struggles to hold back tears, but emotions take over and he weeps bitterly. His thoughts resound with the realization that Kale had to become the strongest to fill the void. He understands the burden Kale carried, but killing 100 monsters is a different challenge altogether. Rin looks at him anxiously, wondering if even someone like that must have a weak side. Kale suddenly utters that he knows what Ren is thinking, causing him to freeze in surprise. Kale explains that there was a system there similar to the game characteristics, so his physical form didn't matter. Rin listens to him, but still feels uneasy, though he tries to make sense of what he's saying. Kale offers to just follow him if he wants to know the truth, but Ren stubbornly stops. With a determined look, he declares that he will not make a move until he hears an explanation. He presses his hand to his chest, earnestly pleading with Kale to tell him right now. Rin stares forward, his gaze intense, his eyes filled with worry. The thought of Bang Taegeul makes him uneasy, and he repeats the name faintly. Kale calmly informs him that they are heading straight to the lair of this guy, the school's biggest bully. Ren is stunned by what he hears, and is stunned to clarify if he's really the one who's been stalking him. He looks at Kale in amazement, not understanding how he knew about it. Ren asks suspiciously if Kale knew all along. Kale answers the question with a slight smile, hinting that he couldn't help but know. Rin admits to himself that he tried to hide the truth so as not to look weak. With a downcast look, Kale finally utters an apology, realizing his guilt to his brother. Memories take him back in time to when he first learned the truth after his first cycle. Kale casts one last glance at Ren, informing him that he will be out of the house for a while. Ren doesn't even notice this in his sleep, and later remembers that his brother had gone somewhere that day. The phone rings sharply, rousing him from his slumber, and he reaches for it irritably. Sleepily he answers, but the voice on the other end of the line asks if he is Ren's guardian. He is given the terrible news that he must come to the hospital immediately. Kale bursts into the room, heart clenched with anxiety, but he's already too late. Ren sits in the dark, blinded after being brutally beaten by Bang Taegeul. With bitterness, Kale realizes that his weakness prevented him from protecting his brother. Only one thing resounds in his thoughts: endless regret and a silent apology to Ren. He looks at him now with a hard stare, determined that no one else will be able to hurt him. Night shrouds the building, but screams erupt inside, breaking the oppressive silence. One of the boys is writhing painfully on the ground, having been hit hard in the stomach. A loud voice jeeringly reminds him that everyone was supposed to bring money. The guy on the floor breathes heavily, unable to respond, which only angers the bully. His angry gaze flashes anger and he swings for another punch with fury. The group of boys look at their leader with admiration, praising his ruthlessness. They whisper among themselves, noting that even seniors from other schools are afraid of him. The ringleader curses irritably, angry that he couldn't get the money to buy a motorcycle. Turning to his underlings, he asks demandingly where he can get the money quickly. The guys tense up, feverishly going over their options, but no one can immediately give an answer. One of the guys suddenly slaps his forehead, as if he has just remembered something important. He suggests turning to the tall guy with curly hair, wondering why he wasn't called in sooner. The ringleader smirks when he hears Ren's name and declares that he was going to beat him up anyway. The other underlings look at him approvingly, thinking it's a good idea to make some easy money. However, one of them doubts it, as Ren has nothing, which makes the leader think twice. The bully leader smirks, complaining that no matter how much he beats Ren, he still doesn't have any money. One of the guys interjects in surprise, then adds that he doesn't even have parents. The other one remarks that Ren only lives with his brother, which makes the ringleader hesitate for a moment. Suddenly he tenses, feeling a strange tension in the air, and his handmaidens glance around anxiously. Ren and Kale appear in the doorway, their silhouettes illuminated by a cold glow, filling the room with an oppressive atmosphere. The ringleader looks up in surprise, not immediately realizing who has entered the room. When he sees Ren, he smirks and mockingly remarks that he was frightened for nothing. His expression changes dramatically as he yells Ren's name, angry at his appearance. Ren tensely stands next to Kale, his voice shaking as he quietly apologizes. The ringleader squints irritably as he scrutinizes Kale, annoyed at the thought of his face pissing him off. The ringleader mockingly asks who is standing next to Ren, not hiding his disdain. Ren tries to answer, but his voice shakes, and Kale calmly states that he is his older brother. The ringleader smirks, reminding him that Ren was told to keep quiet, and accuses him of snitching. Clapping his hands together, he announces with a chuckle that they are both doomed today. His underlings laugh, wondering how someone like Ren dared to challenge their ringleader. One of the bullies slowly approaches, mockingly asking if Kale knows how to fight. He looks at Ren with disdain, mockingly raising his hand as if about to strike. Suddenly his head jerks sharply to the side. Kale's punch was too fast. The boy falls backward with a thud, and his partner recoils in horror. With a scream of rage, he rushes forward, swinging for the blow, not realizing his mistake. Kale swiftly moves forward, his blow sending his opponent into the air. The guy flies backwards before he realizes what has happened. Another bully panics and tries to dodge, but Kale is faster. One of the underlings rushes forward in a rage, shouting threats. But before he can attack, a powerful blow to the head disarms him instantly. The bullies are writhing on the floor, their groans filling the silence of the hall as Kale stands calmly before them. The ringleader smirks as he looks at the battered underlings and dismissively calls them trash. His gaze lingers on Kale, and he mockingly reflects that he seems to have boxed. With a lazy smile, he slowly approaches, causing tension in the air. Stopping in front of Kale, he mockingly asks if physical strength is really that important in boxing. Kale mockingly asks if the ringleader has seen the latest news, hinting at something important. He frowns, wondering what he's talking about, but the irritation in his voice grows quickly. Enraged, he lunges forward with a shout, swinging his fist with a strange energy. Kale remains calm, his gaze remaining cold even in the face of the attack. Suddenly he deftly dodges, and the ringleader loses his balance, surprised by such a swift reaction. Something was wrong, his breathing was hitching, his head was spinning, and an unnaturally distorted figure was blurring before his eyes. He clenched his teeth in panic, unable to understand why his blows were failing. Ren, shrouded in energy, calmly said that after the news, the enemy wouldn't even dare to attack. With intimidating confidence, he clenched his fist, energy swirled around him, heralding the inevitable strike. The opponent flew into the air from the crushing blow, and Ren's voice coldly reminded him of his mistake. The boy swung with fury, putting all his strength into the blow, but it went through the void. He shouted a curse, but suddenly realized that the target had disappeared right in front of him. Looking around in confusion, he tried to figure out where his opponent had disappeared to. His eyes widened with horror. It was impossible, he hadn't even noticed the moment of disappearance. But there was no time to ponder. The next blow struck him with crushing force. His opponent staggered, clasped his face with his hand and angrily exhaled a single word, but Ren remained calm. As he lowered his gaze, he saw blood on his palm, and the realization of his own weakness flashed in his eyes. Anger overwhelmed him, a scream of rage ripped through the silence. He was ready to kill for this shame. Clenching his fist, he lunged forward, swinging with frantic determination to strike the fatal blow. But before his fist reached its target, Ren intercepted the attack with a deft move, breaking his attacker's plan. Another blow struck him squarely in the face, causing him to stagger backward with a painful groan. He was barely on his feet, staggering as those around him watched his humiliating defeat. Gritting his teeth, he realized that Ren was punching him in the face on purpose, humiliating him even more. Anger boiled in his chest, if only he could strike back. But before the dream could come true, his body flew into the air, thrown back by the powerful attack. His opponent, shrieking, rushed forward, desperate for one last blow. But it was instantaneous, his face contorted in pain as the blow struck him first. His body flew backwards, spinning in the air before collapsing heavily to the ground. Faint moans echoed in the silence as he struggled to rise on his trembling arms. Ren looked at him without emotion and calmly asked if he was in pain. Ren sat with his arms wrapped around himself, remembering the pain he could never forget. His opponent, with trembling hands resting on the floor, fearfully begged to stay away from him. He cried out, throwing up his hands in fear as Ren stepped forward silently. Fingers closed around his face with an icy grip, cutting off any pathetic protests. With a predatory smile, Ren calmly said that he shouldn't have messed with his brother. His opponent's lips trembled as he looked up incomprehensibly, sensing the impending danger. Suddenly, his body shuddered as a powerful energy enveloped him, gripping him like a vice. He cried out in pain, desperately trying to break free, but the grip only intensified. Realization flashed in the other man's eyes as panic gripped his mind. Screams filled the room and the others rushed away in fear, saving their lives. A piercing cry of pain echoed through the room, causing even Ren to look away for a moment. He looked down calmly, reminding his opponent what would happen if he dared to attack again. With shaking hands, he nodded hastily, stammering that he wouldn't dare touch again. Rin smiled, but the coldness in his gaze didn't disappear. He said he had to end this right. His opponent screamed in horror as his body soared into the air and disappeared outside the building with a clatter. Junior hesitantly called out to run, still shaken by what had just happened. As he ran closer, he asked incredulously where he had learned to fight like that. Rin only grinned and explained that players could use their abilities in real life. When his brother perplexedly questioned, Rin said with a slight smile that he would show him clearly. A flash of light lit up the air, and a sleek black blade form appeared in his hand. The younger man exhaled in amazement, unable to believe his eyes. The knife had literally appeared out of thin air. Rin smiled and calmly explained that he could summon the weapon he had received just like this one. Toth frowned, remembering how Rin had dodged it, and asked if it involved the same power. Rin confirmed, adding that his agility was beyond that of a normal person or even a professional athlete. But when Junior asked what would happen when he leveled up, Rin lied, hiding the truth. Rin thought back to one of the past cycles when he was forced to reveal the truth too early. He pressed his lips together, thinking that he wouldn't let his brother go through the humiliation just because of him. Though he had his revenge, he knew new battles lay ahead and he needed to be ready. Pushing his gloomy thoughts away, he asked his brother if he wanted to come over for breakfast. He nodded with a slight smile, and they headed for the nearest convenience store. Junior looked around perplexed, noticing that Rin hadn't followed him to the grocery. Rin stood at the ATM and silently pulled out a card, clearly preoccupied with his thoughts. He stared at the screen, realizing that he was withdrawing everything he had accumulated in the meantime. The amount on the display flashed before his eyes, but he didn't hesitate and confirmed the transaction. Junior raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw the money, but Rin only calmly replied that he needed it. Junior looked back at the counters and hesitantly asked if they would be choosing food here. He looked at the price tags and remarked that everything was too expensive, but Rin only waved it away. Rin calmly asked if he was going to celebrate New Year's Eve eating only noodles. The younger man's eyes lit up as he grabbed the package and happily announced that he had chosen a dish. He smiled as he cradled the food in his hands, while Rin silently watched his genuine joy. Rin suggested with a slight smile that next time they go to a restaurant and order real meat. Junior cheerfully objected, saying that this was enough for him. Ren only thought cryptically that he would soon feed him so that he would get tired of meat himself. The hot pieces with a delicious crust lay on the rice, exuding a tantalizing aroma. Junior gladly closed his eyes, savoring the taste of the food he had long dreamed of. Junior excitedly exclaimed that the food was incredibly delicious, but Ren only smiled and told him to eat more. But suddenly Ren rose from the table, causing his brother to perplexedly ask where he was going. He silently stepped back, leaving the younger one with the plates, who was now watching him with suspicion. Ren's hand came down sharply on the table, grabbing the stack of coupons with an expression of utter determination. Junior jumped up in shock, realizing that Ren had withdrawn all the money to spend on the lottery. Junior asked in confusion how many lottery tickets Ren had bought. Ren calmly replied that there were 20, as if it was something completely normal. Junior aghast, realizing that Ren had spent all the money on this dubious investment. But Ren only smiled enigmatically and said to wait, hinting that he had a plan. However, Junior became even more alarmed when he saw Ren repeating the same numbers. Ren looked at the tickets with confidence and announced that those numbers were the winning numbers. They sat at the table looking at the screen as the lottery draw began. Junior was nervously biting his nails, muttering that they had just thrown away a lot of money. He sighed miserably, thinking that they would have been better off buying a proper meal with that money. Meanwhile, the announcer announced the first two lucky numbers, and the tension in the room rose. The third winning number was announced, and Junior's gaze froze in tense anticipation. The fourth and fifth matched, his breath caught and his hands trembled with excitement. He exclaimed that this was crazy. Looking at the ticket, they had their first win. Still in disbelief, he embarrassedly asked for a pinch, but received only an indifferent response. Grabbing his phone, he anxiously asked if it was a dream, but Ren only smiled calmly. Ren asked with a chuckle if Junior would have preferred it to be a dream. He shook his head vigorously and said he would never agree to such a thing. Counting the numbers once more, he shrieked with joy as he realized their overwhelming victory. Rin calmly told him not to shout so loudly, reminding him that the neighbors might hear. The younger man glowed with happiness and asked if Rin wasn't happy himself, to which he only smiled softly. Ren nodded with a slight smile, remembering that he himself had once shouted with joy for the first time. The younger man glowed, repeating that they had indeed won, but still not fully believing it. Ren's eyes flashed back to the grim memories of millions dead and an unstable economy. He knew that the future would change and trade between the players would become even more active. Junior stared at the tickets in amazement, wondering how much they'd be paid, but Ren just shrugged. Ren leaned on his hand thoughtfully, a slight grin touching his lips as the jackpot was truly huge. The non-high-up bank loomed before him, where he headed confidently, knowing this visit wasn't his first. Inside, Ren calmly walked past the guards, feeling no excitement. He'd taken the top prize dozens of times before. Approaching the counter, Ren calmly informed the employee that he had come to collect his first-place lottery winnings. The cashier was surprised at first, but quickly smiled, keeping it polite, and congratulated him with a slight smile. The cashier glanced at Ren and was surprised to think that the winner still looked like a student. He then politely inquired where exactly Ren had purchased the ticket, to which he calmly replied, QS24, Yonghui branch. The teller opened his eyes wide, exclaiming in surprise as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Another bank employee was quietly discussing with a colleague that 115 tickets had won this time, and he repeated the number in surprise. The man next to him nodded and added with a smile that what was even more surprising was that 100 of those tickets had been bought in one place. The cashier wondered in confusion if all these tickets had been purchased by one person, which seemed impossible. The man sternly reminded him that if someone bought a ticket at the Yonghui branch, the bank president should be called immediately. The cashier, remaining polite, asked Ren to wait for a while before proceeding to process his winnings. After a few minutes, an elderly man approached him, smiled warmly, and thanked him for waiting. The president of the bank, Guan Juno, introduced himself and while shaking Ren's hand, he called him Ryu Min. Guan Juno looked at Ren respectfully and sincerely congratulated him for winning the lottery. He then motioned to go to a more private place, gesturing for Ren to follow him. Stopping in front of a door labeled Lottery Ticket Team, he kindly pointed inside. Ren entered following the bank president, and the woman in the office hurriedly rose to greet them. She looked at Ren with concern and wondered if he was the president's son. Guan Juno introduced Ren as a very important guest and asked the female employee to make him comfortable. The woman stunned, wondering if the man in front of her was really the same person who won with 100 tickets. Trying to cope with her excitement, she mentally reminded herself to remain calm. Then, pulling herself together, with a polite smile, she invited Ren to sit down at the table to discuss the details. Offering him drinks, she was surprised when Ren declined and calmly stated that he wanted his reward immediately. The employee politely asked Ren if she could check his lottery tickets first. Ren wordlessly handed her a thick stack of tickets, placing them directly on the table in front of her. She studied the tickets in amazement, amazed that they were all purchased with the same numbers. When she finished checking, she excitedly announced that all 100 tickets were indeed the winning tickets for first place. Ren looked at her calmly and, without losing his composure, asked the big question: how much would he get? The bank employee nervously hesitated, preparing to announce the amount of the winnings while Ren calmly waited for the answer. His account was to receive about 22.5 billion won, and after taxes, there was about 15 billion won left over. Right after that, he started looking for a new place to live, filling out the paperwork at his convenience. By evening, Ren opened a stock market account, intending to invest in promising stocks. Later, he smilingly asked his friend how he felt about their new home, and the friend confirmed in admiration that it was amazing. Ren explained with a slight smile that he chose this house because it had good security. But his friend wondered why they were paying rent, since they had enough money to buy a place to live. Ren calmly replied that he had no more money, because he had invested almost all of it in Bitcoin. His friend froze in bewilderment, his face reflecting his complete shock at what he had heard. Ren gently patted him on the shoulder and assured him that he had thought of everything carefully, so there was no need to worry. Ren confidently stated that he could always make money from the lottery again, because he had seen the numbers in his dreams. His friend was shocked to think that he had only heard of people dreaming about winning numbers before. Running up to Ren, he excitedly asked him not to forget those numbers under any circumstances. Ren grinned and assured him that such a thing was impossible, as he had done it countless times. Ignoring the commotion, he offered to have lunch and then suddenly spoke of the fact that it was time to leave. Ren looked at his friend with a slight smile and calmly informed him that they were moving today. At that moment, someone's hand struck the wall with force, blowing it to pieces. The man who had struck stood confidently in front of the shattered surface, savoring his power. With a smug smile, He noted that putting all the characterization points into strength had been a great idea. His fist clenched again, and energy flashed around it, heralding another crushing blow. The boy grinned smugly, knowing that he had received a rune of strength that doubled his physical power. He stared at the cracked wall in admiration, certain that even champions would envy such a blow. Clenching his fists, he thought it was time to put his power to the test in real combat and test it in action. A shout came from the street, calling out to Ryu Ming, but the surroundings were quiet and people were hurriedly dispersing. The guy frowned, realizing that he was still alive, but for some reason ignoring all his calls. Rin calmly looked at his opponent, and the guy angrily thought that he was just an arrogant upstart. The guy remembered with rage how Rin had looked down at him and was now ready to kill him. Furious, he pounded on the door with his fists, loudly demanding that Rin come out to him. He was sure he was just hiding inside, not daring to come out for a fair fight. Clenching his fist, he prepared to act, determined that the next step would be decisive. The boy smirked, figuring that since Rin wasn't answering, it meant that he simply wasn't home. However, gritting his teeth, he contemplated just kicking the door open and barging in. Suddenly, an elderly man's voice came from behind him, sternly asking what he was doing at someone else's door. The guy turned around irritably and mockingly asked if he happened to be the owner of the building. The old man nonchalantly adjusted his glasses and calmly confirmed that he was the owner of the building. The old man calmly asked why he was standing here, if he wanted to meet a friend. The guy instantly changed in his face, smiled strangely and confirmed that he was just looking for a friend. Then, pretending to be worried, he asked the owner of the house to open the door as he had lost contact with his friend. The old man sighed regretfully and remarked that his friend seemed to have just left him behind. Pensive, he added that the tenant had moved out today, but he himself didn't know where exactly he had gone. The boy clenched his fist. He was angry that Run had just disappeared without leaving a single trace. Meanwhile, a huge building towered in front of Run. The mere sight of it was breathtaking. His companion noted in delight that the entrance was equipped with a revolving door, like a luxury hotel. They walked quietly inside, his friend still amazed at the luxury of the new place. When Rin handed the card to the employee, he was surprised to think that there were even special passes here. The guard carefully checked Ren's card and, after confirming their identity, allowed them to proceed. His friend noted with admiration that even at the entrance to the building there were guards, which spoke of a high level of security. When the elevator reached the desired floor, Rin calmly offered to go, and his companion enthusiastically agreed. Once inside, they froze, amazed by the luxurious interior and spacious rooms. Rin calmly said that the apartment was 330 square meters, which caused his friend a real shock. Ren's friend looked around the spacious rooms doubtfully and wondered if the apartment was too big for two people. Then, a little anxiously, he inquired as to how much their contract to rent this luxurious accommodation had cost. When he heard that the deposit was 500 million won and the rent was 22 million a month, he came to a shock. He confusedly recalled how he had recently worried about spending a few thousand won on lunch at the store. Rin, however, calmly replied that the more expensive the housing, the better the security, so spending that much was simply necessary. Every first of the month, all players suddenly fall into narcolepsy, becoming completely defenseless. At this time, they are especially vulnerable to disasters such as fires, earthquakes, and enemy attacks. Therefore, players should prepare in advance and be in the safest place possible before crossing over to another world. Rin coldly thought that no matter how strong you are there, in reality, death remains final. He then calmly asked Vaughn if he liked their new home, and he happily confirmed that it was great. Rin remarked with a slight smile that it was good if Vaughn really liked their new home. Vaughn suddenly fell silent, his gaze faded, and he lowered his head as if regretting something. Finally, he mumbled an apology, realizing that he would soon find himself embroiled in deadly battles again. Rin looked at him questioningly, and Vaughn admitted with dismay that he had been taking everything too lightly. Suddenly, a loud smack sounded in the air, causing him to open his eyes wide in surprise. Rin asked Vaughn with a slight smile, wondering if he really thought he wouldn't come back after the next round. Then, taking the conversation aside, he suggested forgetting everything and just going out to eat at a restaurant. Vaughn, a little embarrassed, nodded back, agreeing to follow him, though the anxiety still lingered. At that moment, the phone in Ren's hand vibrated, but he only stared coldly at the screen. He realized that he had been found, but decided to just ignore the call, knowing that in reality they would never meet again. The day after moving in, Rin leaves his room, yawning and rubbing his face from sleepiness. He notices Kale at the exit and squints to ask where he's going. Kale informs him with a smile that he ordered rice cakes and is now on his way to pick them up. Rin freezes, blinks a few times, and incredulously asks again, as if he can't believe his ears. He frowns, remembering past regressions, and realizes, Kale has never done this before. Rin crosses his arms and asks suspiciously why Kale bought those rice cakes. Kale calmly explains that they recently moved, so they need to treat the neighbors. Rin thinks about it for a moment, then admits that being a good neighbor is actually not a bad idea. Kale offers to do it on her own, but Ren is adamant that they should go together. Suddenly, someone presses the doorbell, and a questioning voice comes from the speaker. Kale holds out a plate of rice cakes with a smile and politely informs her that she and Run have just moved in. The woman opens the door, looks at them in surprise, and greets them with a friendly hello. Noticing their similar facial features, she curiously asks if they are brothers, to which Kale confirms with a slight chuckle. He explains that he brought the brownies as a gift, adding that they taste better while warm. The woman thanks, accepting the treat, and Kale says goodbye with a smile, promising to see her again. Rin informs his neighbor with a slight smile that he and Kale moved into apartment 4302 yesterday. Kale, beaming with joy, holds out a plate of rice cakes, genuinely eager to treat his new acquaintance. Ren politely adds that they will now be under his care, showing respect. The woman accepts the treat with a warm smile, and her child shyly thanks them. Kale, noticing that there is only one apartment left, enthusiastically suggests that Ren finish his visits. Ren walks down the hallway with Kale, who tells them that this floor belongs to a penthouse. Hearing that the owners occupy 2 floors at once, Kale wonders in amazement how rich they are. Rin ponders aloud, speculating that someone from a wealthy family or a celebrity might live here. Kale doesn't hesitate to press the bell, but only silence greets them in response. Shrugging, he rubs his neck tiredly and suggests that Rin just leave since no one is here. Kale stops abruptly as he notices the door begin to open, his gaze tense and wary. Rin turns around as well and exhales in amazement, looking at the girl walking out of the apartment. He whispers her name, amazed that the famous actress So Erin is standing in front of them. Kale stares at her dumbfounded and compares her to an angel in his mind, amazed by her beauty. But before they can speak, a hand appears in front of them, blocking their way. A man in a strict suit blocks the way and coldly asks who they are. Run, slightly confused, tries to clarify, but Kale calmly explains that they live 1 floor below. The man's face changes slightly and clarifies if they're just here to introduce themselves to the neighbors. Kale confirms with a smile and holds out rice cakes, but is abruptly interrupted. The guard refuses the treat, briefly throwing in that she doesn't eat such things, and leaves. The guard silently pulls out a card and swipes it across the elevator panel, activating access. So Erin nods uncertainly and complies with his request, stepping inside. Rin watches and frowns, noting for himself the guard's rude behavior. Kale calmly tells Run to ignore such people. Rin nods, but he is left with a strange feeling inside that he can't explain. Kale turns to Ren with burning eyes, asking enthusiastically if he saw it. Ren looks at him perplexed and frowns, not understanding what he's talking about. Kale grabs him by the shoulders and exclaims that they have just met So Erin herself. Rin remains motionless, his gaze becoming intense as if he's remembering something. The phone screen flashes with disturbing headlines reporting the deaths of famous actors. So Erin sits on the couch, exhaling heavily, her gaze tired and pensive. She stares at the screen of her phone, tensely wondering what is happening to this world. A message pops up on the screen, where someone asks if she's heard the latest news. A friend sends her the sad news of a co-worker's death, to which she replies briefly. She is asked about tomorrow's funeral, and after a bit of hesitation, she agrees to go along. So Erin slowly lowers her hand to the phone, her face remaining tense and pensive. She sighs heavily, thinking that even the more famous actors didn't survive the first stage. Looking away, she realizes that without the rune, her name would have been in the news as well. She frowns, wondering if she would have succeeded without the support and the penthouse she was given. The guard's sharp voice brings her out of her thoughts, and she hastily replies that it's fine. The guard calmly tells So Erin that he's always willing to listen to her if something is bothering her. She slowly replies that she is thinking about how the world has changed and how she can survive from here on out. He confidently states that she has nothing to worry about since she has him by her side. So Erin lowers her head and he advises her to worry less and just rely on him. After a moment, she looks up and agrees with a warm smile, trusting his words. So Erin remembers how wary she was of her bodyguard at first, sensing her bodyguard following her. Her thoughts drift back to the past, where she fights monsters, realizing she wouldn't have survived without him. The guard calmly assures her that he will always protect her, so she shouldn't give up. So Erin looks at him with a warm smile and sincerely thanks him for his support. Thinking about her new neighbors, she involuntarily thinks of rice cakes, but she is immediately warned off. So Erin sits in the room, listening to the guards say that they might have offended the neighbors. He's convinced that they just wanted something in return, and it's a good thing they refused. So Erin touches her face, remembering that Run and Kale didn't seem like bad people. She ponders, for one of them must have survived brutal battles with monsters. Looking away, she marvels at how someone with such a past can look so calm. The man in the suit spoke confidently, stating that killing 100 goblins was easy and those who failed were just fools. Liz tensed, her lips trembling. Even by the standards of the other world, Ren was too strong. Ren slashed through the air, clutching his weapon, his black scythe technique leaving behind the mangled bodies of his enemies. Liz watched him, her heart beating faster. Next to him, she had a chance to survive. Alone, she clutched her hand, remembering the fight. She'd survived this round, but what would happen next? Outside the window was a picturesque landscape, and in the room was the monotonous hum of a vacuum cleaner. Ren was cleaning. When he heard the footsteps, he looked up and said with a smile that he had come home. Kale turned to him, greeting him with a friendly look, and asked if he had gotten the money. Ren, as if discussing something insignificant, replied that the amount was small, only 15 billion. Kale thought for a moment, reminded that this was the fourth time, but only quietly mumbled, "Ah." The bank employee looked at Ren in bewilderment, wondering why he was here again. Ren reminded him with a slight smile that he had already told him the secret of his success only a week ago. The man shook his head, sighing in amazement. He wished he could have prophetic dreams like that too. Ren looked away, smiling faintly, not knowing how to respond to such an admission. Kale looked at him and asked curiously if he was going to invest in Bitcoin again. Kale looked at Ren with concern, cautiously asking if it was time to sell before the price dropped. Ren calmly met his gaze and confidently replied that it wasn't time to sell yet. He smiled, assuring Kale that he would handle everything himself and there was nothing to worry about. Then, changing the subject, Ren suggested they go out to eat, as if the matter at hand was insignificant. Later, they sat at a table and then walked around the night city, enjoying the carefree moment. In the silence of the night, Ren sat by the bed, holding Kale's hand tightly, as if he was afraid to let go. Kale looked at him anxiously, begging him to come back alive and not risk it in vain. Ren smiled awkwardly, reminding him that he had already defeated the strongest and had nothing to worry about. Kale sighed, recognizing his strength, but still couldn't shake off his doubts. With a slight smile, Ren rubbed his head, advising him to stop worrying and just get some sleep. Kale ran his hand through Ren's hair, promising that when he woke up, he would be there for him too. A bright golden light engulfed Ren's body as he disappeared, as if transported to another world. A number of people appeared in the forest, looking around confused, not realizing where they had been thrown. Someone nervously remarked that this place was nothing like where the previous round had taken place. The crowd shuddered when they saw Ren, the best in the previous round, known as Black Braid. Ren notices that the people around him recognize him, but try to keep their distance. He looks around at those gathered and realizes that everyone is already here. We can expect the start. He wonders when she will appear, because he is waiting for her. Suddenly the voice of an angel is heard, asking if everyone is in place, attracting attention. Someone in the crowd notices that the angel is different and wonders what has happened. The angel informs them that his predecessor, who was in charge of the first round, was unable to arrive due to an accident. He smiles and urges people not to panic, assuring them that the situation is under control. He then announces that he will be leading them himself from now on, his voice sounding confident. He rises into the air, declaring that since everyone is in place, we can begin. The crowd freezes as the angel promises to tell the second round's task. The angel announces the second round task, and glowing panels appear in the air. The screen displays the rules. You must choose a zone representative in 3 hours. People are perplexed as they study the information, discussing why no one has passed the challenge yet. Some speculate that it could mean that everyone will survive if they choose correctly. Angel, noticing their confusion, smiles and says that they seem to need an explanation. Angel calmly explains that this round is not a combat round, they just need to choose a zone representative. He shows a symbolic sign, adding that the representative will be given the power to force others to obey. Tension builds in the crowd, some wondering about the possibilities such power brings. The angel clarifies that in 3 hours the voting will begin, and the decision will be final. One of the participants hesitantly asks if it is really that simple, because it seems strange. The angel confirms that the vote counts as a successful passage and the survivors will be able to return home. Someone is stunned to realize that they don't have to fight to survive, but simply choose a representative. Angel reminds them that they have 3 hours to discuss, after which the voting will begin. One participant excitedly remarks that since it's so simple, that's great. Another person grumbles unhappily that he was preparing for a fight and finds this round too boring. One of the contestants complains irritably that he has put everything into his power but can't use it. Rin notices this and concludes that the one probably received a rune that enhances his physical stats. He assesses the situation, realizing that it's going the same way as previous attempts. The crowd is busy discussing the vote, but that's not the most important thing to Ren at the moment. He guesses that besides the main quest, there is a hidden quest related to class selection. Rin clutches his weapon tightly, realizing that he needs to reach level 10 quickly. A hobgoblin appears in the forest in front of him, warily peering out from behind the bushes with a weapon in his hands. Rin calmly gets into a fighting stance and challenges the monster, urging it to attack. The hobgoblin rushes forward with a roar, but Rin rushes towards him with lightning speed. A moment and the enemy is defeated, and a message confirms that Rin has defeated the hobgoblin. Rin notices the message about the first kill out of 100 and the triple experience boost activated. He realizes that going deeper into the forest was the right decision, as it will speed up the hunt. Clutching his weapon, he realizes that if one goblin has appeared, there are others nearby. Soon, ominous red eyes begin to flicker among the dense foliage, approaching in his direction. A group of armed goblins appear in front of him, ready to attack, but he stands still, waiting for them to move. Rin delivers a precise blow and the hobgoblin falls, confirming another victory. The system records his progress, 5 kills out of 100, and his stats continue to rise. The bodies of defeated enemies lie around, and he stands quietly among them, analyzing the situation. He is surprised that it has only been half an hour, but he has already achieved a significant result. Opening the characterization window, he notices that he has almost reached level 10, ahead of his expectations. Rin decides to invest the spare characterization points into agility, believing it to be the best strategy. He ponders 4 key parameters: strength, intelligence, agility, and luck. Each of them affects different aspects: physical power, magical abilities, speed, and evasion. Balanced development is essential, because without sufficient dexterity, it's impossible to dodge a deadly blow. Looking at his window of characteristics, he realizes that all parameters are important and none of them can be neglected. The Reaper class combines both physical and magical damage, so it is important to develop the characteristics evenly. Rin notices a suspicious rustle nearby and realizes that someone is watching him, which has never happened before. He realizes that he was too focused on the battle to notice the surveillance earlier. Clutching his weapon, he coldly demands that the lurker show himself and explain his intentions. His voice sounds threatening as he warns that this watcher must be prepared to die if he does not. A girl suddenly emerges from hiding, raising her hands and apologizing for following Ren. He recognizes her as a famous actress and wonders if she was the one watching him. The guy standing next to her with a slight tilt of his head apologizes for what happened, admitting their guilt. He assures that they had no bad intentions and asks Ren not to worry. Rin looks at him carefully and recognizes him as On Sangchul. Rin recognizes this man immediately. He is Ma Kyungrak's right-hand man. Ma Kyungrak, known by his alias Sky Demon, is the heir to the country's largest corporation. Rin realizes that this man is one of his targets, and an alliance with him will simplify the path to power. He didn't expect to meet him so early and ponders how to use this situation to his advantage. But he is troubled by something else. Why is he near Co Aaron, the same one who was with him yesterday? Rin recalls that Ma Kyungrak's company sponsored celebrities, which makes him wonder. He asks with cold wariness how long they've been following him around, disapproving of changing the future. The girl admits that they started following him from the moment he entered the forest and apologizes. On Sangchul assures that they didn't have bad intentions, they just wanted to propose. The girl excitedly reminds him that Rin took first place in the first round and now it matters. The girl cautiously suggests they form a team, hoping they can work together. Rin looks at her with a cold chuckle, hinting that it only makes sense in one way. He indifferently states that he's doing fine on his own and doesn't need their help. There is clear irritation in his words. He tells them not to waste his time and to leave. Turning around, he calmly walks off deep into the forest, leaving them behind among the defeated enemies. On Sangchul is annoyed that Rin is being too arrogant, and he clucks his tongue in displeasure. Co Aaron sighs heavily and kneels down, clearly disappointed by the rejection. On Sangchul recognizes that Rin took the top spot for a reason. His presence was overwhelming. Co Aaron sadly says that she wanted to be on the same team as him, but it didn't work out. On Sangchul just shrugs, reminding her that people like Rin never work on a team. On Sangchul irritably states that it's not a shame, it's just a shame for the time wasted on Ren. Co Aaron suggests with a slight smile that they go monster hunting instead, now that they're here. She resolutely sets off ahead, determined to make the most of the time she has left. The forest seems quiet, but shadows flicker amongst the foliage, hinting at a lurking threat. Ren attacks the goblin with lightning speed, mentally scoffing at the attempts to draw him into the team. Rin swiftly kills the hobgoblin, focusing on his main goal of leveling up as soon as possible. The system confirms his victory, recording 60 enemies killed and a 60% increase in stats thanks to the Rune of Carnage. Suddenly, gnolls emerge from the darkness of the forest, their fierce roar filling the space, heralding a new threat. Rin notes with mild surprise that so many gnolls at once is rare luck, and a smile touches his lips. Wasting no time, he rushes into the fray, meeting one of them with a swift and powerful blow. The gnolls rush at Ren, their clawed paws cleaving the air in an attempt to attack. He deftly dodges and then strikes with precision, instantly sending another enemy into the ground. The system confirms his victory, recording 65 kills and a further 65% characterization boost. A notification sounds. He has risen to level 10, reaching an important threshold in his development. The conditions have now been met and he has the opportunity to choose his class. Rin receives a notification that he can now choose a class and also discovers a hidden task. The other participants see this for the first time and are confused, not realizing where to find the item to advance. While everyone knows that getting a class is important, no one knows how to get the right item. You can only advance further if you fulfill special conditions, but they remain a mystery to most. For example, to become a warrior, you need to raise your strength to 50 and kill 30 monsters in an hour. To become a berserker, you must hunt while bleeding, and assassins must repeatedly stab you in the back. Rin recalls how he used to hunt down monsters himself and then hide from them in the forest. That's how he once obtained the hunter class, but now his choice would be different. After learning about the Reaper class, he decides to fully focus on it. Without hesitating, he activates the advancement item, feeling his body being filled with new power. A window appears in front of Ren with the choice of class, but he doesn't even hesitate and immediately makes a decision. A light envelopes his body, confirming that he has successfully advanced and now carries the title of Reaper. As a reward, he receives a special rune that enhances his attacks and speed depending on the time of day. This rune gives him the advantage of doubling his damage during the day and making his attacks faster at night. The power seals directly into his body, causing the surrounding energy to swirl around him. As a reward for advancing, Ren receives a new weapon, the Reaper's Scythe, which enhances his attacks. His rank is raised from novice to apprentice, confirming that he has taken a step forward. The system reminds you that ranks are divided into 6 levels, and each brings new benefits. When you upgrade, you can unlock additional skills or activate hidden class features. He now masters the Death Seal ability, which doubles the damage on a selected target. Rin gains the Reaper's Scythe, a rare weapon that requires high strength and skill in combat. As the first player to advance, he receives an additional reward, a random bag of gold. The system tells him that advancing brings new skills, and the tracking ability is unlocked for him. This skill allows him to find a target, but requires an exact name and appearance match. Smiling, he ponders whether to test the ability since it costs as much as 20,000 gold. Rin enters Huang Youngman's name, and the system confirms his face and nickname match. The exact location of the target appears in front of him, only 190 meters away. He is surprised, because Huang Youngman was 2 kilometers away before. This means that he has also entered the forest, which makes Rin wonder about his intentions. Meanwhile, On Sangchul and Co Aaron, out of breath, continue on their way through the thicket. Co Aaron falls to the ground, breathing heavily and a searing pain throbbing in her leg. On Sangchul tries to support her, reassuring her that they can't stop. He insists that even though the pain is severe, she needs to get up and continue on her way. Anxiously, he recalls the theory that if a body is hurt here, it can be hurt in the real world as well. Co Aaron gathers his strength and agrees to hold on, but at that moment, a threatening voice is heard. Co Aaron and On Sangchul freeze as a group of people appear in front of them. Huang Youngman smirks and says that it looks like the pain wasn't enough for them. On Sangchul clenches his teeth, realizing that Co Aaron is the reason they got caught. He grunts irritably, realizing that they have no choice but to fight. Gathering his wits, he pulls out his weapon, and his opponents watch him with interest. Huang Youngman chuckles as he looks at On Sangchul and mockingly asks if he's really going to fight. He points to his group and advises him to take a closer look at how much bigger they are. On Sangchul, gritting his teeth, tries to understand the reason for the attack and demands an explanation. Huang Youngman, who maintains a confident smile, nonchalantly agrees that they didn't do anything. He then calmly adds that they just need a few things, making On Sangchul tense up. Huang Youngman points to the girl next to On Sangchul with a smirk, stating that they're only interested in her. He calmly adds that he doesn't care about On Sangchul himself, since he's of no value. The members of his group look at each other and joke that maybe it's not Co Aaron at all, but just someone trying to imitate her. One of them smirks and remarks that since the looks are the same, it doesn't matter. Hwang Youngmin looks at On Sangchul and offers a deal. If he leaves Co Aaron here, he can leave. On Sangchul stares straight ahead, mentally berating himself for not saying right away that Co Aaron was their target. A desperate thought flashes through his mind that he's not going to die because of her. He tenses up, realizing that if he can't protect the girl, he'll disappoint Ma Kyungrak. Hwang Youngmin smirks as he notices On Sangchul's stance and mockingly asks if he's going to fight. On Sangchul, not hiding his anger, tries to remind him that their actions are a crime, but his words only elicit a chuckle. Rin watched the situation with a smirk and then laughed loudly, mocking his opponent's words. The opponent shrugged mockingly, stating that there were no laws here, and his men laughed behind him. He stepped forward confidently, offering Rin a chance to try and prove his point, but he clearly wasn't taking the situation seriously himself. Liz clutched her weapon tensely, and Ren gritted his teeth, realizing that his opponent was telling an unpleasant truth. He mentally recognized that words would accomplish nothing, and despite his wounds, he decided to fight. Ren's opponent recoiled back in surprise, shocked by the sudden appearance of a new figure in the forest. Ren followed his gaze frowning, and noticed a man standing in the shadows of the trees, arms crossed. A thought raced through his mind: how and when did this stranger manage to appear here while remaining unnoticed? One of the fighters stepped forward, demanding to know what he was doing here, but the situation was already getting out of hand. The stranger calmly turned his gaze to the one who had spoken, ignoring his mocking remark, and coldly inquired about the situation. The boy explained with desperation in his voice that they had been attacked while trying to protect Liz, and begged for help. Rin stared at him silently, faintly wrinkling his nose, in no hurry to respond. One of the opponents irritably threw in that it didn't matter if it was true or not, suggesting they just leave. Rin indifferently stated that it was none of his business, as if finally closing the subject. When asked about the meaning of the words, he calmly replied that these people were familiar to him, leaving no room for objection. The opponents backed away in panic, watching as a dark, ominous aura erupted around Ren. Liz and her companions froze as he slowly stepped forward, clutching weapons imbued with dark energy. The guy next to Liz nervously exhaled his name and she thanked him for his help with slight relief. Ren calmly stated that helping in this situation benefited him as well, hiding his true intentions. Glancing at his ally, he mentally noted that this was a good chance to leave the right impression. Ren mentally calculated the benefit, realizing that helping here would bring him great rewards in the future. He slowly stepped forward, noting indifferently that he simply couldn't stand these people. The opponents instantly tensed up, their leader shouting in panic, demanding they stay back. Rin stopped, his face impassive, and the silence only added to the tension. With a slight chuckle, he wondered if they had already changed their minds about fighting, savoring their fear. The boy gritted his teeth, barely containing his irritation as he remembered how Ren had single-handedly dealt with the goblins. Bright flashes of magic pierced the air, and the bodies of his opponents collapsed to the ground in the blink of an eye. The thought of fighting such a monster sent shivers through him, making him hesitate. Ren looked at him calmly and offered an honest confession if he didn't want to fight. With drops of sweat on his forehead, the boy carefully clarified if that would allow him to just walk away. Ren smirked, crossing his arms, and lazily tossed in that he would think about the offer. His opponent tensed as he looked at him, realizing that retreating now would be tantamount to humiliation. A disturbing thought flashed through his mind about how it would look in front of his comrades. He gritted his teeth, realizing that such an act would be a disgrace in the presence of certain people. A sharp realization hit him, and fear flashed in his eyes as he realized he had fallen into a trap. The enemy recalled his power, assuring himself that he could destroy walls with his bare hands. With a smirk, he declared that Run had gone too far, inciting him to retaliate. Falling to his knees, he sarcastically asked if he wanted him to beg for mercy. Gritting his teeth, he decided to shorten the distance and strike him in the face. His fist slammed into Ren with all his might, and he was sure that even he wouldn't be able to resist. The guy grinned smugly, convincing himself that no one could withstand his blow. Rin calmly stepped forward, his aura enveloping the space, causing his enemy to tense up. With a smile, he noted that a battle without a level playing field would be boring and offered to draw his weapon. The enemy trembled, realizing that the situation was getting out of control, and tried to keep his composure. But before he could do anything, Rin rushed to the attack with lightning speed. His opponent grinned as he realized that Rin had lowered his weapon and rushed forward, expecting a quick strike. With fury, he shouted that this was the end, swinging his fist with killing speed. But in the next instant, his body flew rapidly into the air, thrown back by the powerful counterattack. He collapsed to the ground, rolling on the grass, his mind barely having time to comprehend what had happened. Through clenched teeth, he breathed out a curse, angrily clenching his fist in his trembling hand. The opponent gasped furiously, trying to get up, but he heard Ren's cold order to stop swearing. Ren stepped forward and delivered a powerful punch with indifference, sending him back to the ground. He tried to get up, but another crushing blow forced him to recoil with a painful groan. A series of swift attacks rained down on him, each shockwave shaking his body. In his panic, he realized that these weren't just fist blows, they were like the blows of a massive hammer. The opponent realized with horror that Ren's blows were as powerful as his own. He couldn't believe that he possessed such physical strength without the proper runes. In desperation, his allies screamed, ordering the gunner to open fire, hoping to stop the fight. Liz, seeing the arrow flying, warned Ren, shouting for him to dodge. The archer drew the bowstring in panic, his hands trembling and fear causing him to shout a curse. Arrows flew towards Ren at breakneck speed, but he dodged, causing the archer to panic. With a sudden movement, he was at his side, effortlessly breaking the distance, and drove his fist into his attacker's chest. With a cold chuckle, he assumed that the man had just luckily found a bow while hunting monsters. A dark aura flashed around him, wriggling ominously as he raised his weapon without regret. The archer froze, fear gripping his body as he realized he had met not an ordinary opponent, but an absolute nightmare. One of the opponents screamed in pain, clutching his wounded arm, his scream echoing through the forest. The remaining fighters rushed forward with fury, convinced that Ren would not go unpunished. Red flashes of energy surged into the air, accompanying their attacks, filled with anger and despair. Ren smirked, looking down at them as if he knew the outcome of this fight. The symbol of death flashed on the weapon of one of the attackers, foreshadowing his inevitable fate.